Greetings, trombonists at large. It's hat day. So, today I thought we would talk about a topic that I've touched on before, but never really explained. And I know, me explain anything? Yeah, it's like wandering down a misty trail from the mountains to the shores of enlightenment, but it's all fogged in. And ultimately, I'm just going to tell you, you're on your own, kid. Well, this topic is very much like that. The statement that I've made in past videos is when something sounds overbore or underbore. And typically what I'm talking about is the mouthpiece to the trombone. Overbore is a mouthpiece that feels too large for the instrument, and underbore is a mouthpiece that feels too small for the instrument. Does that mean that the mouthpiece is actually big and is too big for the instrument? Sometimes it does. But the problem with this topic is that it's a very subjective topic. Thus, when we get to the shores of enlightenment, they will be heavily fogged in. But I'll do my best. The concept of sound that you have in your head, which I don't want to go off into the weeds on, we will never make it down the trail if I do. Your concept of sound comes from many different places, but your concept of sound has to do with what you expect to get from your setup and how it works within the setting that you plan to use it in. That being the kind of music you're playing, the group that you're playing in, the size of the group, sometimes even the hall, right? Whether or not it's on a microphone or whether or not you're playing to a live audience. These things can affect how your concept of sound is going to be processed by your head for that express moment. And in those moments, we can have equipment that is either too big or too small. And sometimes we can have mouthpieces that don't necessarily fit the instruments that we're playing. The concept of sound that you have is going to be determined by your buzz. In my buzz, the buzz that I make are all of the tone colors that I need to play any brass instrument, from piccolo trumpet all the way down to tuba. I need to filter out a lot of those overs and unders for me to get into a tenor register where I can efficiently play a tenor trombone. And that filter would be this 5G mouthpiece. And I have this Bach 36 525 bore tenor trombone. This tenor trombone has certain properties by design for its optimal sound. Now, of course, we know that the trombone is going to be an instrument with a certain expansion rate that comes to its end at a certain distance, a certain length. That is what a tenor trombone is. But every manufacturer has their own version of how to produce that instrument. And this instrument, the Bach trombone, has by design its characteristics that give it its sound. Its width of the slide tubes, the diameter, the curvature of the bow, the taper of the bell, the length of the bell, the bead of the bell, whether it's leaded or unleaded, the placement of the braces on the bell, the width of the bell from the gooseneck and the gooseneck itself. All of these things are going to affect the sound of the horn. Even the materials used on the ferrule rings to hold the thing together, right? So these all come together to have an effect on the sound of this instrument. If it were just out there in space, wailing away all on its own, like in a cartoon or something like that, it would be making its most efficient, optimal sound. And if that sound profile is something that I have a filter to use to be able to make produce an efficient sound on this setup that works with my concept, I'm going to like that horn. I'm going to like that setup. And in this case, I do. I, use this in shows and things like that. But that's not always going to be the case. If I take this trombone and I play in a big band or something like that, I feel like I'm working awfully hard, because the concept of sound for those settings, for playing in a small quintet or a little orchestra, a pit orchestra, something like that, this instrument really meets my desire that I hope to obtain in my sound. But that's not always going to be the situation. In our concept of sound, there are many different ways that we can express that concept through many different tones. The concept of trombone sound, especially the tenor trombone, is really big. The box that we can contain all these different envelopes of trombone concept, from like Slide Hyde to Joe Alessi, very different concepts of sound, but they're all still pleasurable. And I enjoy listening to all of that. But my concept of sound, my personal sound, wants to be satisfied in a different way. It's not necessarily what I want to sound like, it's what I expect to sound like within my own head in a certain situation through these very flawed filters and how I receive that information back, the feedback from the instrument in that environment. So if I'm playing in a jazz band or something like that, I'm going to want to use this horn, which is a Bach 6 485 bore horn, much smaller relatively than the Bach 525 bore horn. And for this instrument, if it were out there in space just wailing away doing its thing, it too would have its own character of sound, but by design, with the slides, materials, in this case, nickel tubes, the bell, this Bach 6 has a 7.5-inch bell. Most of them have 7-inch bells. My other Bach 6-4 has a 7-inch bell. This one has a 7.5-inch bell. But it's got its own sound that it's going to be making. And I need to find a filter that takes my sound and optimizes it to take advantage of the natural character of this instrument in an efficient way that satisfies my concept of sound and how I'm making that sound in those acoustic environments. So if this sound on this trombone is playing next to this sound on this trombone, you're going to hear differences. This sound is going to be smaller, it's going to be brighter, it's going to be more compact. It might not have as much penetration as far as distancer is concerned. And because of the profile of sound that this trombone makes compared to the other trombone, I need a different filter to efficiently get the sound that I expect, that I will be satisfied making within my concept of sound. The range of my concept needs to be satisfied in order for me to feel comfortable playing on this setup. Right? And when I'm playing on this mouthpiece, I really like it in this horn. And I used to play that horn a lot. So in this case, I'm using a Giardinelli 12. This is a rather small mouthpiece. It's kind of between a 12C and an 11C on the Bach chart, as opposed to this 5G, which is a big mouthpiece. But I really like playing on this mouthpiece. So if I want to get a more legit sound, can't I just put this mouthpiece into my 525 Bach 36? Sure. Right? It works. It works, and it works okay. But my concept of sound, it doesn't feel right. It feels too narrow. It's like putting on a pair of pants that's too big. I'm going to be having to cinch the waist up, and then I'm going to have a lot of gathers, and it's not going to be comfortable, and that's kind of like playing on this 12 mouthpiece in this 525 bore horn. The profile of sound that this 12 filters from my acoustic sound has fewer mids and fewer lows in it. Those mids and lows happen to be what this 525 bore trombone wants to feed on. It is optimized to really sound good using the very same sound profiles that this mouthpiece wants to filter out, because it is optimized to satisfy the acoustic needs of this smaller 485 bore trombone. And the opposite can be said if I take this 5G and I put it into the 485 bore 6, 485. It sounds pretty good. It works. But as I play this setup over time, it's not meeting the parameter of sound that my personal acceptable range of sound, it's kind of teetering here on the edge of what I want to hear myself produce. And because of that, I feel like I'm trying to pull that sound in. And unlike a pair of pants where I can tighten the belt and make myself uncomfortable, I've got to use my face and my air support to be able to effectively alter the sound enough so that my concept of sound will be satisfied that I can pull that range in. And it's a very difficult thing to do. And because of that, certain things are going to happen. One of them is my endurance, because I'm going to be using my muscles in my face, my embouchure, and my support differently. I'm going to have inconsistency in the way I want to attack, in the support of notes over a whole note. I'm going to have problems with accuracy. I'm going to be chipping notes when I'm going up for them. And another situation is that I'm not going to have as much endurance because I'm fighting my equipment to get my optimal sound within that acceptable range. I'm going to be fighting the equipment using more of my embouchure and more of my support, which is going to tax me and wear me out sooner than if I use an efficient mouthpiece for the purpose that this instrument satisfies my concept of sound. Now, again, this is a subjective thing. And again, it's not what I like to hear. It's not even what I may want to produce, but it's what my concept of sound, using my ears, wants me to sound like, what my concept considers acceptable for me on this instrument in that performance setting. And because of that, one of the things that can happen beyond just endurance and chipping notes and not sounding good, basically, is I'll also be playing out of tune. If I use this large mouthpiece on that small horn or that small mouthpiece on this horn, I play out of tune because there are certain tonal ranges, there are certain acoustic profiles that I'm not able to hear as well. And when that happens, I subconsciously alter my sound so I can hear myself in a group or in a section. My concept of sound also determines my pitch. And if I can't hear through these filters the sound that I'm expecting to obtain from this setup, I'm going to have a hard time playing in tune. Can I adjust this over time? Sure. You can always make adjustments and change these concepts that are ingrained in your brain, but they're ingrained in you. It's a very slow, difficult process that I don't recommend. After all, I'm in my 60s. I don't want to work that hard anymore. So now I just look for the proper filter, for the proper tool to get the optimal sound that it was within my accepted range of sound so that I can get an efficient sound that is to my personal expectation when I play my instrument, that will give me the best endurance, the best attack, the best support, with the least amount of work. So my embouchure is not working as hard, which makes it easier for me to play. So again, we've gotten to the end of the path, and here we are at the shore of enlightenment, and it is fogged in like heck. And all I can say is this is a subjective topic, and what works for me might not work for you at all. So you're on your own, kid. But in general, when I'm talking about concept of sound and I'm talking about underbore or overbore, it's not so much the physical size of the mouthpiece as the profile sound the mouthpiece is wanting to produce. I have a euphonium. In my euphonium, I have a small bore baritone, and in that horn I use an 11. And I used to use a 6.5 AL in this box 6, and it worked fine when I was playing third trombone. But when I started playing more lead, I wanted to be able to have a smaller mouthpiece to make it easier for me to play all night long, something that would work more efficiently on the high end of my horn. And I thought, well, that 11 works great. So I put that 11 into this instrument. It's a smaller mouthpiece than the 6.5 AL, but it just did not work for me at all in this horn. It was foggy and nebulous. All of a sudden, it felt like there was a lot of back pressure because the profile of the 11 is much broader on the bottom. So even though the concept of sound is still more compact on the 11 than it was on the 6.5 AL, because of the shape or the profile of the sound that I was getting on that mouthpiece, it still didn't fit my needs on this horn. So it still felt too big. It still felt overbore, even though physically the mouthpiece was smaller. So I hope that's confusing. Not at all. Good luck. Anyway, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you on the bandstand.